Hi guys, my name is Karthik and I am from executeautomation.com and welcome to our next video of Katalon Studio. And today we're going to work with API testing in Katalon Studio 5.4 post request. So we have already discussed about working with API testing in Katalon Studio, and we discussed how to work with an simple API testing with a GET request. And this time we're going to work with Katalon Studio 5.4 for the post request, which is something many people are asking, like why not just extend this web service video series with so many other different kinds of API testing that we can do. And that's why this video is for you guys who were asking about it. Alright, so let's get started. So today the objective of the video is this. We are going to create an post request to our existing my.json server and verify if the request has been made. So it sounds very simple objective, right? But this brings us to the following topics to be discussed. Something like post operation with Katalon Studio via object repository, and understanding the passing of body via Katalon Studio, and calling the post and passing the body via script, because we have to do it with the script as well, not just from the UI, and then catching the exception to see if we make any mistakes while calling. Because while you do with the UI, you always have a straightforward UI to just pass the body and then perform the operation. But while you write a script, you always end up with some kind of mistakes while passing a body. The string will be different from the one that you pass from the UI. So you have to make sure that the exception is being handled and is reported as well. And then check the post operation by an get method. Again, we are going to use the existing get request that we made in our previous video, and we're going to make use of the same thing, but we're going to extend the concept a little bit here and see if the post operation has been made. And we are going to get via a parameter for the exact post operation that we made before and verify if the element and other objects of the JSON response body is correct or not. And so the code is going to look something like this. So as you can see, there are so many different codes available, so many different methods available, and classes that we have used. So don't worry about the code yet here, because we are going to discuss about this in detail as much as possible. And once again, these are the code that I have never seen in internet so far discussing about it. And I had a hard time to figure out how the code is actually working based on how the UI is actually working. So I could be able to drill down the Katalon Studio's API reference guide and understand how the methods are being created and formed, but there was no official documentation on what we are discussing so far. So we are going to discuss about whatever that I have learned and understood how things are working, and we're going to see how it works while you're going to implement that for your API testing. Alright, so let's quickly see everything in action and understand how things work. So for that, I'm going to flip to Katalon Studio. Alright, so I am in my Katalon Studio 5.4.2, the latest version of Katalon release now, and I'm going to create a new project this time. So before starting to create a new project, let's first quickly see the server that we were using before in our previous video, which is nothing but the JSON server. If you remember, the JSON server is something like a mock server which we used to create a simple web service request, and we saw the response were coming up. And this time we're going to make use of the exact same service this time as well. Something like we are going to create a new post, like an ID of, let's say, 4 with a different title, and author is going to be the same one. And if I create a new post, then it is going to create a post for me, and then it's going to be visible over here in this particular file. So I'm going to start the server, and once again, to start the server, you need to use this JSON server --watch.db.json. So it's going to launch in this particular URL, and I can just go over here. So I'm just going to navigate to localhost 3000, and if I hit enter, it's going to show everything for me. And if I hit the post, so you can see it is going to show all the post which is available within my server. So you can see 1, 2, and 3, this one, right? So if I want to create a new post, so I can quickly show you that in the Postman, so that you will have a better idea of how the same can be achieved with Katalon Studio. I know most of you guys are familiar with Postman, a tool which is used to perform a simple API call or maybe a complex API call. It is a really nice tool because it has cool features which is much accessible and easier. So as you can see, this is the same URL that I have here for the post, right? It's the same localhost 3000, same thing in here. And for the header, I have just selected the content type as application JSON because this is a JSON file. So I have to pass the JSON file over here. And the body, I have given exactly the same thing. I have just copied this guy and I have pasted it over here. And just that the ID is going to be 20 here. So instead of that, let's make this to 4. And instead of city name is C# because that ID will already exist. So I'm going to say Robotium, and the author is going to be Karthik KK, which is cool. And then I'm just going to hit send. That's it, I guess. And if you see the server, you can see there is a post operation being made. And now if I refresh this particular page, you can see there is a new post being created with title as Robotium and author as Karthik KK, right? So that's simple it is. So this is the operation that we're going to make, and we're going to verify if this operation has been successfully made with Katalon Studio as well, because we have not used Katalon Studio so far, and we are going to make use of that. So I'm just going to copy the same body here, and then let's go to the Katalon Studio and let's try to replicate the same thing. So I'm just going to say API testing EA. So that's going to create a new project. So once this video has been completely created, I will upload this particular project within our GitHub of Execute Automation. All right. So now we have this object repository. If you remember, we can create a new web service request as we did in our previous video. And here, let's call this as post. And the URL is going to be something like this one. And I'm going to paste it over here. So you can see that currently it's in get. So I'm going to change this to post. So it became post. I'm going to save it, right? And then I'm going to perform the same operation here. So for the HTTP body, I'm going to go to the postman. I'm going to copy this body here. I'm going to paste it. And since the content type is not text, even though it is text, the content type is not text plain. Rather, it is a application JSON. If you remember, that's exactly what we did in the postman as well. So I'm going to select that. Oops. See, there is some problem sometimes if I try to save, it always reverts back to the application text. All right. So if you go here, you can try to do some change here. But if you make any changes, let's say if you just remove a space, if you save it, and if I go back to the HTTP header, it again turns back to text plain, which is kind of nagging, but you can still try to remember that it also changes. So make sure you always check this before you perform any operation here, or maybe just create a test request. So now we are pretty much good to go, but just that I'm going to change this ID to 5. So because I changed this guy here, this will eventually change. So I'm going to change this again. And if I just run this guy now, you can see that a new response has come to us. I guess it is created. And now if I go to the Edge browser, and if I try to refresh this, you can see that we have this post being created, right? That's cool. That's super easy if I do any testing from here, from this particular UI. But now I have to replicate the exact same thing from the code. That's a super really important thing, because as a automation test engineers, we do a lot of coding than how a mid-range developer actually does, because even a mid-range developer does the fixes or maybe a few enhancements. But for the automation test engineers, we write so much of code like test cases, framework structures, framework maintenance, and a lot of different kinds of languages we have to hop through, because any company that we work for have different requirements of automation testing, and they always want us to be using what tool or technology or languages they are using. So we write so much of code. We should be proud of that. So as that said, I'm going to create a new test case here for the API that we are going to do. And then I'm going to call this as create and verify post. And I'm going to hit OK. So this is a new test case that we have. And within this test case, we are going to start writing the request operation that we were doing before in this particular object repository. So again, I'm going to hop back to the script because I'm seriously not interested in working with the manual mode, right? So I'm here. So these are the different declaration it has got. So for the post operation to be happened, the first thing we need to do is to create a request object. So request object in Katalon Studio is something which is more like a class which performs a request to any API calls that you do. So that's what the request object does for us. So again, as I said, we need to create def of request. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to create a request object. So you can see automatically the IntelliSense is trying to bring us things over here, and the request object has been added in the import there. And then I'm going to do a find test object. So if you remember in our previous video, we did exactly the same thing while we were trying to perform a simple get operation, right? So exactly the same thing I'm doing here as well. So find test object, and this test object is going to be this object that I'm going to use. So I'm going to put that over here. So you can see it automatically brings the code for us, which is really cool. So I can use either like this, or maybe I can even use single quote of post, right? So that this is valid code as well. I can do that. So this will invoke the new request for this particular post operation that we're going to do. So this is the post object, and then we need to pass the body, because if you remember in our post UI that we did, we actually passed the body here, right? So this is the body that we were using. So I'm just gonna cut this code maybe, and then let's go back here to the script, and within this I'm gonna create a body. So the body is gonna be pretty much exactly the same body that we gave here. So I'm just gonna paste it over here, and then I'm gonna set this particular body. So for setting this body, I need to call this request dot set body content. There is a method called set body content for the request object. That's why I have casted this particular request object for the find test object. If not, it's not really going to return things for us. So make sure you cast it here, and then you can see that it expects us to pass the HTTP body content. So again, HTTP body content is a new class, and it's an API for Katalon Studio. So if you just go over here and search for HTTP body content and make sure you type Katalon, you can see that there is an API docs available, but there is no much information, or at least an example available of how to use this particular HTTP body content. But you can see they have some methods here. So basically they have something like a get content type, or maybe there is a get input stream, write to, and things of that nature. But the one which we need to use is actually HTTP text body, because we have to pass the content type as you can see here, text, right? So this is the HTTP body type, which is the HTTP text body content. So we have to use the HTTP text content body. So again, just go back to the search and just search for HTTP text body content. So there is a class in the Katalon Studio. Again, it is not even coming in the Google. It's not Google though. Let's go to the Google. So you can see that's available in the Google. And then you can see that within the HTTP text body content, you can see there have different overloaded methods, something like text and character set. So the character set is nothing but the UTF-8 or something like that. So this is the default character set. You don't really have to specify that. And there is another one method, which is one we are interested in, something like text, character set, and then content type. So the reason why we need this particular method is because we actually have to use the content type as application/JSON, if you remember. So the default content type of this particular method is actually text/plain, but the one which we need to use is the application/JSON. So we have to pass that as well. So you can see there is no such information available in Katalon Studio documentation, neither in the documentation side nor as an example. That was really a hard time for me to figure out how this particular method actually works. But maybe sooner or later the team is going to add that. But as of now, let's quickly do that our own so that we can understand, or maybe we will be on the top of how things are working. So as that said, I'm going to make use of the HTTP text body content over here. And as I said, this method actually has 3 different overloaded methods. The one you can directly pass the body, something like this. And then the another one is with the character set. So the character set that we need to pass is the UTF-8, and then the content type. So the content type is nothing but application/JSON, right? So this is the body content. And then once everything is set, so we have set the body and we set the body content, and then we have set the content type as application/JSON. And the final thing to do is to send this request using the WS, or nothing but the web service dot send request, right? So here I'm going to pass this request. So everything is done here. I'm going to save it. And now if I try to run this particular code, we will be getting some kind of error, and I will quickly show you how to handle that error as well. So I'm going to run that. In the meantime, we can see the server if there is any request or response coming in. So you can see that there is some problem happening. So you can see that the set body content is actually showing us some sort of errors. So let's quickly see what's the problem. It says that it is unable to resolve the class. So basically sometimes the Katalon Studio is not that intuitive enough to add these header files for us automatically. So we need to add them as well. So I'm just quickly going to add them over here. I'm going to save it. So now you can see that the implementation is there, or it is imported. So I'm just going to run that again. Let's see what's going to happen. So you can see there is a post happen. So the error is gone right now. And now if I go back here to my local host, and if I refresh this, you can see that something has happened, but not everything has happened. You can see that it has only ID of 6, but not the title and author here. That's the one which we are looking for, right? But somehow it has not come here. So do you think this is because we have used the duplicate key, something like 5? So maybe let's try to make this as 7. Save it. And even if I try to run this time, you can see that if I try to refresh the Chrome Edge browser, it is still ID:7. The reason is because we are not doing it correctly as it is expected. So let's try to do a try catch block here so that we can get a clear exception or something like that. So I'm going to do a try. So this is, since like a Java programming language, I can use the try catch block here. And Groovy is much similar if you have a good knowledge on the Java. So I'm just going to do that over here. And then we can use println of ex dot detailed messages maybe. And now if I try to execute, so we can also try to put a breakpoint here if we want, which is debug toggle breakpoint here, and then here debug toggle breakpoint, and try to debug this test. All right, open the debug perspective for us. So it's coming in here, and then I'm just gonna let this resume. So you can see that the exception is not even being handled, but still the execution is happening. Well, this can happen because if you go to your object repository of the post, and if you see the HTTP header here, the value is actually text/plain. And you can ask me that we have already used the option here as application/JSON for our body content, but why do you really want to care about that one in here? The thing is, like, for some reason the object has to be same as the one which we are passing in the content type in the code. I guess the object is taking the highest priority than the code itself. So once I save this, and if I go back to the test case over here to the script, and let's also ensure that we change this to 8, and if I save this and if I run this time, the code actually works. So if I just run this, so you can see that the test is actually running. There you go. And now if I try to go and refresh this, you can see that it is actually working. So this is how it actually works. So for some reason, Katalon Studio actually takes the precedence of the object repository than the actual code that we are passing in as the content type itself. So this is very important that you make sure that the content type is correct. So I had a hard time figuring out how this code is actually working, and I spent so much of time in figuring out that. But since I could able to figure out that once I was trying to compare with the Postman, it seems like everything was legal. The only thing was the object repository was kind of misleading. And also make sure that within your object repository, the HTTP body is empty. So if you have anything in the HTTP body while you try to run that from the script, that's also going to break. So make sure that you don't really leave any trace over there, right? So this is the creation of the post request. The final thing to do is to verify if the response that we are getting out from this particular post is actually correct or not. And once again, I need to create an get request. So I'm going to create a web service, and let's call this as get. And again, the URL is going to be pretty much the same thing. And I'm going to paste it over here, hit OK. So because we're going to get all the posts, so this should be legal. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to go over here and go to the script. So this time I'm going to get the response and see if the response that we get out from this particular post request that we made is correct or not. So again, we have to do exactly the same thing that we did earlier. So I'm going to just copy this code and paste it over here. So the find test object of the get method. So I'm just gonna say get. So this is the same object that we are passing in, and then we have to pass the parameter here. So basically, if I want to get the first value or the second value, let's say I'm gonna get the 8th value from here. So I just have to put something like this of 8. If I hit enter, you can see I can get the 8th value out from the get request, right? So I'm going to do exactly the same thing in here. So in order to do that, I'm just going to create a it's going to be a response. Within the response, there is something called as set rest parameter. So you can see that this is the set rest parameter object, but the set rest parameters method actually requires us to pass a list of rest parameters. So this is again something kind of confusing because we don't know what is the list of rest parameter that we need to pass. So the list is actually a type of test object property. So we need to do that as well. Again, it seems to be kind of confusing at the first place, but once you get used to it, you will know that it is kind of easy as well. You can see that this time, even for the response, I'm using the request object, but not the response object. So I'm just going to leave it to request object, and I will quickly show you, and then I will also show you how you can use the response object and use that to perform the same get operation. So for now, let it be here. And since we need to pass a list of test object property, and then within this test object property, I'm going to just say like params is equal to new of array list. And then I'm just going to add the parameters. So again, for the parameters that I need to add is this one, id is equal to 8, right? So it's going to be a new of test object property. And you can see that this particular constructor of this particular class takes 3 parameters as well as 4 parameters. So we can go with the 3 parameter one. You can see that it expects us to pass 3 different values. The first one is the name. Again, the name is nothing but the ID, and the condition is going to be the condition type with, we can say that we can use the equals or something like that. And then the value is going to be the value that we're going to verify. So let's change this to 9 because this is what we're going to looking for this time. So I'm just going to pass 9 in here. So if I create a new post for the ID of 9, and then I'm going to verify something like Appium, then I expect the 9 to be Appium. That's my quest here. Whatever post that I make, I want to verify if that particular post has come here or not. And then we need to set the rest param. So the parameters is going to be nothing but the params that we just created. So that's it. So this is the only thing that we need to do to create the rest parameter. And finally, as we did before, we need to send the request to the server so that it can process the response. So I'm going to do that here. And we need to get the particular output because we need to do further validation with that. So let's call this as result. I'm going to save it. And then I want to verify. So this is exactly the same code that we discussed before. I'm going to verify the element property value, which is nothing but this one based on the response object. So which is nothing but the result. And the body that we're going to verify is nothing but the title maybe. And because it is an array, I need to create an array type here. And the body that I'm going to verify is going to be something like, let's say I'm going to verify the title Appium. And the failure handling is going to be failure handling dot stop on failure, which is cool. No worries on that. So you can see that we have did so many operations here for the request as well. So let's quickly run this and see how it works. So I'm just gonna basically run this test, and I expect a new post happens there. And you can see the test got failed for some reason. It says that the title is actually not valid. The reason is because the title should be in double quotes because there should be a text. And let's make this as 10. This is kind of nagging for now, so just leave with me as of now. And I'm just going to run this. So I want to quickly see if I can verify the response as well. It happens, but for some reason it says there is a problem with the missing method exception. And the missing method exception happens because we did not imported the list and the array list. So we need to do that as well because we have used the list and the array list. It is not resolved yet. So as I said before, Katalon is not that intuitive enough to add those references for us. So I have added them as well. I'm going to save them all. And now if I try to run this test, hopefully this time the test will execute. Oops, the test is failing again. I guess the reason is because we have to, I think I made a mistype here. So we need to use the result instead of the response. So that's my bad. Sorry for that. Just gonna save it again. And then if I try to run this time, hopefully at least now the code will run without any problem. There you go. The test got executed without any problem this time. And you can see that even the verification has been done successfully, which is really cool. I could see that we could able to create a request and we could able to verify them as well. So why not just make a generic number here like 20 and let's say Appiums, and here it's going to be 20. It's going to be Appiums. I'm going to save it and I'm going to run this time. Let's go to the server now. So let's put 20. Hit enter. There you go. You can see that is there is a ID of 20 Appiums and Karthik KK. That's really cool. And the test got passed as well. So it could able to verify without any problem. That's really cool. So this is how you can see that with Katalon Studio, you can perform a post and then you can also verify the response with get. So that's what it is. So as I said, we can try to use the response object over here, and if I use the response object, you can see that the set rest parameter method is not really working. So if I just use set, you can see there is something called as set response text. So you can only do this with, you cannot use the rest parameter there. So that's the reason I have not used the response object. Rather, I have used the request object because essentially we are trying to do a request here, even with the get. So that's going to be a request, and the response that we get, we're going to just verify the result. So that's why I have not used the response object. Rather, I used the request object. So that's it, guys. This is how you can do a post and a verification of get using Katalon Studio. So once again, thank you very much for watching this video and have a great day.